He always looked invincible behind the wrench and roar of engines. But at 55, Richard Rawlings has finally dropped the act. After years of speculation, the man behind Fast and Loud is stepping into the light, revealing the secrets he's long held in the dark. This is the day the rumors cease to be whispers and become confessions. Richard Rawlings was born on March 30th, 1969, in a working-class neighborhood of Fort Worth, Texas. Even as a child, his world revolved around wheels. One of the earliest photographs shows a small boy in a pedal-powered Volkswagen Beetle, grinning as though that little toy held the map to his future. While other kids woke to cartoons, Richard had a different schedule. At 3 a.m., he rose with his father and delivered newspapers. As they drove past quiet houses in darkness, Richard memorized their driveways, noting what cars sat where. He would deliver again in the afternoon, and on weekends he pedaled route to route, collecting payments and cataloging every vehicle along the way. This wasn't mere observation. It was training. He insisted, "I ride by your house twice a day. How would I not know what's in your driveway?" His father, often juggling 2 or 3 jobs, always made sure Richard had a car or motorcycle as a reward. That tangible lesson became his creed. If you want something special, you must earn it. By age 14, Richard had bought his first car, a green 1974 Mercury Comet, paid for with newspaper money. He used it not just to drive, but to show off, burning rubber in school parking lots, doing donuts, making his classmates stare. The color was far from classic, but to him, it was perfect. In his senior year, he owned a black 1977 Trans Am, already flipping vehicles, buying, repairing, reselling. Before his high school graduation in 1987, he had traded more than 20 cars. What others saw as teenage gimmicks, he saw as the foundation of his future. Then came a night in his early 20s that would change him forever. Cruising a 1965 Ford Mustang Fastback near Oakland Boulevard in Fort Worth, he was ambushed by carjackers. In the melee, a bullet tore through his shoulder and down his arm. He survived, but the experience didn't discourage him. If anything, it steeled him. Between 1988 and 1990, before he was a brand or a television face, Rawlings wore uniforms, police officer, firefighter, paramedic, all before turning 21. His father had advised getting a steady job with benefits. Richard tried, but the call of something greater pulled him away. When the late 1980s turned into the 90s, Richard was already restless. He'd seen danger as a first responder, but he wasn't meant to live paycheck to paycheck. He left behind his uniform and founded Lincoln Press, a small printing company in Dallas. It wasn't glamorous, far from it. But it was his first taste of running something truly his own. He hustled, networked, and outworked anyone around him. Clients liked his charm. Competitors hated his speed. By his late 20s, he'd already earned enough to indulge his first obsession: cars. While others spent weekends resting, Richard prowled through garages, barns, and scrapyards, hunting forgotten classics. He'd buy them, fix them in small rented shops, then sell them for a modest profit. Every deal taught him 2 things: the art of persuasion and the cost of failure. But behind the loud charisma, something darker brewed. The business world wasn't forgiving, and his appetite for risk often went too far. There were times when Lincoln Press nearly collapsed, when bills stacked higher than the cars he wanted to buy. He'd later admit in interviews that there were months when he sold personal belongings just to keep the lights on. Still, quitting wasn't an option. It was during these years that the idea for Gas Monkey Garage began to take shape. It wasn't just about cars, it was about attitude. A mix of chaos, humor, and rebellion that reflected Richard himself. By 2002, he sold Lincoln Press for a sum large enough to chase the dream full-time. That same year, he opened a modest shop in Dallas, the first official Gas Monkey Garage. The early days were brutal. He worked around the clock with a skeleton crew, sometimes sleeping on the shop floor. He made promises he could barely afford to keep, trading time, energy, and trust for survival. But word spread fast. The man with the goatee, tattoos, and relentless energy became a legend in the underground car scene. He didn't just build cars, he built stories around them. Gas Monkey became more than a name. It became a roar echoing through the streets of Dallas. By 2012, Richard Rawlings had already built a reputation in the Dallas car scene, but what happened next would change his life forever. Discovery Channel came calling, drawn by his manic energy and the wild atmosphere of Gas Monkey Garage. They wanted a new kind of car show, something raw, unpredictable, and fast. Richard didn't hesitate. This was his shot. When Fast and Loud premiered that same year, it exploded overnight. The world fell in love with the loud engines, the last-minute builds, and the swagger of a man who seemed unstoppable. Richard was suddenly everywhere. TV screens, magazines, talk shows. The Gas Monkey brand became a global symbol of grit and gasoline. Fans saw him as the American dream personified, a man who had clawed his way from the bottom to the top through sheer drive. But behind the cameras, the chaos was real. Deadlines were brutal. Tempers flared. Richard's relationship with his crew, especially his lead mechanic Aaron Kaufman, grew tense under the weight of fame. What audiences saw as playful banter often masked real conflict. Aaron was meticulous, a perfectionist. Richard was fast, impulsive, and business-minded. The friction between them made great television, but it was slowly tearing the team apart. Money poured in, but so did exhaustion. Richard opened Gas Monkey Bar and Grill, Gas Monkey Live, and even launched an energy drink line. He expanded faster than he could breathe. Each new venture felt like proof he was winning. But deep down, the man who once loved the smell of oil and steel was being replaced by a restless businessman trapped in meetings and sponsorship deals. By 2016, Aaron had left the show. It was a blow that fans felt immediately, and so did Richard. The heart of the original Gas Monkey crew was gone, and what remained was success without soul. "It's just business," he would say publicly. But privately, those who knew him saw a man wrestling with the loneliness of fame, realizing that the more the empire grew, the more he felt disconnected from the very thing that made him start. And yet, he couldn't stop. Because by then, Fast and Loud wasn't just a show. It was his identity. By 2017, Richard Rawlings had become more than a car builder. He was a full-fledged brand. Fast and Loud was a global hit. Gas Monkey was stamped on everything from T-shirts to energy drinks, and his Dallas empire spanned bars, live venues, and restaurants. But the bigger it grew, the more fragile it became. Behind the shiny chrome and roaring engines, things were beginning to rust. The first major crack appeared in 2018. The Gas Monkey Bar and Grill, once a proud extension of his brand, turned into a battleground. Rawlings was sued for defamation in a $6 million lawsuit filed by his own business partners. They accused him of breaching contracts and damaging the company's reputation by interfering in management. For years, Richard had been the face of Gas Monkey, its pulse, its identity. Now, that same name was being dragged through court filings and legal drama. The man who once conquered every track found himself trapped in the slow, suffocating pace of litigation. At the same time, his second major venue, Gas Monkey Live, a large concert hall he'd opened in 2014, was struggling. It had been his dream to merge cars, music, and culture into one explosive brand. But by 2020, financial strain and the COVID-19 pandemic forced it to shut its doors for good. Another piece of his empire gone. The hits kept coming. His marriage to Katarina Deason fell apart shortly after their lavish engagement and whirlwind romance. Their relationship, so public and glamorous online, quietly ended before it ever found its rhythm. For a man who built his life around speed, love had once again come and gone too fast. By the late 2010s, Fast and Loud was running out of fuel. What began as a raw, unscripted car show had turned mechanical, predictable. Discovery Channel kept pushing for more builds, more episodes, more drama. The pressure stripped away the authenticity that once made Gas Monkey Garage electric. Aaron Kaufman, Richard's closest collaborator, left in 2016 after years of creative frustration. The tight schedules and made-for-TV demands clashed with his craftsmanship. His exit changed everything. Without Aaron's steady balance, the heart of the show weakened. Richard admitted later, "We were building cars for television, not for passion anymore." In 2021, the Gas Monkey Bar and Grill, once his proudest side venture, was rebranded as Amplified Live. Though he retained the trademark, his direct role was gone. What had started as a symbol of his energy and style was now under someone else's control. The original spirit of Gas Monkey, the chaos, the laughter, the long nights, had vanished. From the outside, Richard still looked untouchable. The cars, the fame, the swagger. But lawsuits, failed deals, and broken partnerships had taken their toll. The man who built an empire from the ground up was exhausted. Years of chasing production schedules and business deadlines had left him drained. By the end of 2020, he shut down Fast and Loud for good. 16 seasons, hundreds of cars, and one final goodbye. There was no special episode or grand farewell, just a quiet announcement. "It's been one hell of a ride," he said. When the cameras stopped rolling, the silence that followed hit harder than expected. For the first time in decades, there were no builds waiting, no engines revving, no chaos to control. The next year was supposed to be a reset, but it started with endings. The Gas Monkey Bar and Grill was gone in all but name, and the empire Richard had built now moved without him. Watching it drift away was more painful than he ever admitted. He had always believed anything broken could be rebuilt. Now, he wasn't so sure. Still, Rawlings refused to vanish. If he couldn't build cars on TV, he would rebuild his own life. He launched the Gas Monkey Garage podcast, reconnecting with fans directly. No scripts, no producers, just his own voice and raw honesty. He talked about burnout, fame, and the price of chasing success. He laughed at his own mistakes. He sounded lighter, but the weight in his tone was still there. "You can lose everything chasing what you think you want," he said in one episode. "And sometimes, that's the only way to find what really matters." That same year, he began liquidating part of his personal car collection, selling over 20 of his prized vehicles through Bring a Trailer. To the outside world, it looked like another business move. But for Richard, it was a cleansing. Each sale felt like letting go of a version of himself that no longer fit. Gone were the beer-budget muscle cars of his youth. In their place came refined European machines, Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Porsches. They weren't just cars. They represented a shift in his mindset. He was no longer chasing flash. He was seeking craftsmanship, history, and meaning. By 2023, he began investing again, but cautiously. He announced plans for a new venture, Gas Monkey Ice House in Texas, another attempt to fuse car culture and live entertainment. But this time, he approached it differently. Slower, smarter. He had learned the cost of expanding too fast. "It's not about being everywhere anymore," he told fans. "It's about doing it right." In interviews, Richard has become noticeably more reflective. The wild swagger is still there, but it's tempered by something deeper: awareness. He talks about failure without shame and success without arrogance. At 55, the man once addicted to motion is finally learning stillness. He often says he's grateful for the chaos because it forced him to rebuild from zero, not his business, but his peace. When asked if he misses Fast and Loud, he pauses. "I miss the people," he admits. But I don't miss the pace. There's something tragic and beautiful about that confession. The man who once outran everything, poverty, obscurity, even failure, has finally stopped running. And in that stillness, Richard Rawlings might have found what he was searching for all along. By his mid-50s, Richard Rawlings had finally slowed down, something no one thought he could ever do. The roaring chaos of fast and loud was gone, replaced by quiet mornings and long drives with no cameras chasing him. For the first time in years, he was listening instead of performing. Yet the silence came with whispers, rumors that he was broke, divorced again, or that Gas Monkey had gone under for good. For months, Richard ignored it. He'd spent most of his career fighting public perception, but this time was different. The empire wasn't collapsing. It was evolving, just not in the way people expected. In late 2022, he finally spoke up. "I'm not broke. I'm not done. I just needed to stop and breathe," he said on his Gas Monkey Garage YouTube channel. His tone wasn't defensive, just tired. It wasn't a denial. It was an admission that, for years, he'd been running from himself. The truth was harsher than the rumors. He had lost millions in lawsuits and business closures. The $6 million Gas Monkey Bar dispute had dragged him through courts and headlines, leaving scars deeper than financial ones. His second marriage to Katarina Deason had been tested by the same chaos that once fueled his fame. The man who once bragged about living fast had finally hit a wall. But the collapse brought clarity. Richard started over, not with television, but with something simpler. He launched Gas Monkey Podcast, began restoring rare European cars, and started appearing at auctions not as a showman, but as a craftsman again. The flash was gone, replaced by something quieter. Purpose. He was no longer chasing fame. He was rebuilding identity. In one 2024 interview, Richard spoke candidly about what really happened behind the cameras. "I lost sight of why I started," he said. "At some point I was just trying to keep up with networks, with business, with expectations. I thought success meant saying yes to everything. Turns out real success is knowing when to stop." It wasn't a confession of failure. It was the kind of truth that only comes after you've lost everything that doesn't matter. He still drives fast. He still signs deals. But now the man behind the wheel isn't chasing the next big score. He's just trying to enjoy the ride. The hair is grayer, the tone softer, but the fire's still there, smaller, steadier, wiser. At 55, Richard Rawlings finally confirmed what fans had long suspected. Not the rumors of ruin, but the truth beneath them. He wasn't broken. He was rebuilding. The empire didn't die. It just changed hands, from the man the world watched to the man he finally became when the cameras turned off. After everything, fame, fortune, failure, and redemption, Richard Rawlings finally found peace in slowing down. Do you think walking away from success is the only way to find freedom? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories behind the legends.